If you grow plants but they're not growing very well, you may need to assess your soil health. Oftentimes, many of the crops and the plants that we grow these days are not grown in an ideal environment, right? Specifically, the soil is usually off. It's not as healthy as it could be or as it should be. But healthy soil is able to hold itself together, making it resistant to wind and water erosion, nutrient loss, and it is able to soak up water like a sponge and filter it through. So how do we test the health of our soil at home? One quick and simple soil health test that we can use in our own backyard without any of the fancy equipment is called the Soil Slake test, as defined by John Stika in a Soil Owner's Manual on page 72. So in his book, he recommended collecting multiple soil aggregates, all of them each being smaller than a golf ball, whereas I collected one soil aggregate that was larger than a golf ball because I don't follow directions very well. So these soil aggregates you would then let dry for a few days so that the water can evaporate out of them, and then once they're dry, it's good to get like a clear container. I used a clear glass jar, and I put some wire mesh, which was like a piece of chicken wire fencing, across the top so that the aggregate could sit at the top of the jar so that I could see if there was any particulate matter or soil particles that would fall down to the bottom of the jar. So it kind of helps me gauge that a little bit more easily. And then what I did was I let that clump of soil, that aggregate, sit there in the water. And at this point, it's really important to pay close attention to how that aggregate responds to being in the water, right? Does it break apart really fast? Does it hold together? Does it swell? Does the air leave as the water is coming into that aggregate? All like the big changes and the small changes going on in there. It's really important to pay attention to it and take it all in, because the more quickly that soil aggregate breaks down in the water, the worse your soil health is. As Stika says in that book, if that aggregate breaks down in under a minute, your soil health is really probably not that great. But if it holds together for a long time, like multiple minutes, multiple hours, multiple days, maybe even a few weeks, then your soil health is actually functioning at a fairly decent capacity. There's always improvement to be done, and this is only a basic test, right? So it's not going to reveal all the intricacies of things that you can improve on. Basically, passing this test is not necessarily going to mean that you have excellent soil health. It just means probably that you have at least good soil health, right? There are many other factors, many other moving parts to the health of the soil that this test, as simple and quick and easy as it is, right, it will not be able to measure those other aspects. But the aggregates of soil that we find in the ground are very important, right? We have macro aggregates and we have micro aggregates, right? Micro aggregates aren't really a huge focus on, particularly in this video, but macro aggregates are like, the larger clumps. And these are held together by roots, by rootlets, by polysaccharides and various glycoproteins produced by various soil-based organisms, and also held together by fungal hyphae as well. And there are also some minerals that may act as like a kind of cement to help hold these together as well. Calcium, of course, being one of them. And so these aggregates are what allow for like cracks or openings in the soil, right? So it allows the soil to breathe. Air can get in there. Water can get in there and be held in that soil. It can filter through that whole accumulation, that maze of aggregates within the soil. Whereas if we don't have that, if we have poor soil structure, if we have soil that doesn't aggregate itself together, then that soil is more likely to break apart in rain, and those tiny particles will rise to the soil, will rise to the surface of the soil and form like a crust, like a hard pan on top of the soil, preventing air and water from getting down into the soil. And so you create anaerobic conditions. It's not very healthy for a lot of the crops that we try to grow. and it's not healthy for the soil. So if our soil isn't that great, if we have poor aggregate stability, how can we improve it? Well, basically we want to keep the soil covered as much as possible, preferably with growing plants, right? Having living plant roots in the soil, because those are going to produce the exudates and provide habitat for the soil health, for the soil microbiome, right? The microorganisms in there that will continue to produce these compounds and polysaccharides that would hold the soil together more effectively, right? We want to be able to amend the soil with more life as well, right? Maybe using some form of inoculants or compost teas or even just compost that we can add into the soil, which will add some of these microorganisms and some of these different nutrients and compounds that will help feed that soil health. And of course, having a diversity of plants helps to balance out the soil health too, because different types of plants facilitate the growth of different types or different communities of microorganisms in the soil, right? So basically it comes down to soil coverage, preferably with living plants, and even better with a diversity of plants. So thank you so much for checking out this video. Maybe you'll want to do your own soil slake test. Highly recommend getting that book by John Stika, A Soil Owner's Manual. It goes over some very good concepts to soil health and a lot of the science that goes into how that soil health is maintained, how it's commonly not maintained actually with how many of us live today, especially in like an agricultural context, and ways that we can improve to boost soil health, so we can have more productive, more healthy crops. So thanks again for checking out this video. I do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.